The camera doesn't lie, but people do. And for 21 years, someone in Hartsville, Tennessee, looked their neighbors in the eyes, went to church on Sundays, attended community barbecues, and carried a secret so dark it would eventually shatter everything this small town thought it knew about trust, about innocence, and about the monsters who walk among us wearing the most familiar faces. What I'm about to tell you is not just a story about murder. It's a story about patience. The patience of a killer who thought time would erase their sins, and the patience of those who refused to let a young woman be forgotten. It's about the moment when a community discovered that evil doesn't always lurk in shadows. Sometimes, it sits right next to you at the dinner table. In 2003, a woman vanished. The investigation went cold. The case files gathered dust, and everyone moved on. Everyone except one detective who couldn't sleep, one family who couldn't stop grieving, and one killer who couldn't outrun the truth forever. What happened in 2024 changed everything. An arrest was made. And when that name was announced, when that face appeared on the news, the people of Hartsville didn't just gasp. They wept. They screamed. Some refused to believe it. Because the person now sitting in a jail cell, accused of murder, was someone they all knew. Someone they all trusted. Someone who had been hiding in plain sight for over 2 decades. Now, before I take you deeper into this story, I need you to do something. If you believe that victims deserve justice, if you believe that their stories should be told and never forgotten, then hit that subscribe button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because cases like this only get solved when people care enough to keep paying attention. When you share, when you engage, you become part of the reason cold cases get reopened. You become part of the reason families finally get answers. So subscribe, share, and let's make sure no victim is ever truly forgotten. The year was 2003. George W. Bush was in the White House. Finding Nemo was breaking box office records. And in a quiet corner of Truesdale County, Tennessee, life moved at the same unhurried pace it always had. Hartsville was the kind of place where everybody knew everybody, where doors stayed unlocked, where children rode their bikes until the streetlights came on. It was a place where people believed they were safe. Jessica Morrison was 23 years old that autumn. She had honey blonde hair that caught the light just right, a laugh that could fill a room, and dreams bigger than the small town that raised her. She worked as a waitress at a local diner, saving money for nursing school. She wanted to help people, wanted to make a difference. Everyone who knew her said the same thing. Jessica was special. Jessica was going places. On the night of October 14th, 2003, Jessica finished her shift at the diner at 11 p.m. Her coworkers watched her walk to her car, a beat-up Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door. She waved goodbye. She smiled. And then she drove away into the darkness. That was the last time anyone saw Jessica Morrison alive. The next morning, her mother called the diner, confused and worried. Jessica hadn't come home. Jessica always came home. She was responsible, predictable, the kind of daughter who called if she was going to be even 5 minutes late. Something was wrong. Her mother knew it in her bones. Knew it with that primal instinct that parents develop the moment they hold their child for the first time. By noon, a search party had formed. By sunset, they found her car. It was parked on a dirt road 3 miles outside of town, hidden behind a grove of oak trees. The driver's side door was open. Her purse was still inside. Her keys were in the ignition. But Jessica was gone. The investigation that followed consumed the community. Volunteers combed through fields and forests. Divers searched the nearby lakes. Flyers with Jessica's smiling face appeared on every telephone pole, in every shop window, on every community bulletin board. The whole town was looking for her. The whole town wanted her to come home. But deep down, people were already starting to fear the worst. Because Hartsville was not a place where young women simply disappeared. This wasn't Nashville or Memphis. This was home. And home was supposed to be safe. Let me take you back even further, before the disappearance, before the fear, to help you understand who Jessica Morrison really was and why her loss left such an unfillable void in this community. Jessica grew up in a small yellow house on Maple Street, the middle child of 3 siblings. Her father worked at the local hardware store. Her mother was a teacher's aide at the elementary school. They weren't wealthy, but they were rich in the ways that mattered: love, laughter, and an unshakable belief that hard work could open any door. From a young age, Jessica showed a tender heart. She was the child who brought home injured birds, who befriended the lonely kids at school, who spent her summers volunteering at the local animal shelter. Her teachers remembered her as bright, but not boastful, kind without being naive. She had a wisdom beyond her years, an understanding that life wasn't always fair, but that didn't mean you stopped trying to make it better. After graduating from Truesdale County High School in 1998, Jessica faced a crossroads. She wanted to go to college, to become a nurse, but money was tight. Her father's hours had been cut. Her younger brother needed braces. So Jessica did what she always did. She put others first. She took a job at the diner, telling herself it was temporary, telling herself she'd save enough eventually. 5 years later, she was still there. But she hadn't given up. She was taking classes at the community college, 1 or 2 at a time, slowly working toward her dream. Her textbook sat on her nightstand, highlighted and dog-eared. She studied during her breaks, during slow shifts, during any quiet moment she could find. Her determination was quiet but fierce. In the months before her disappearance, Jessica had seemed happier than usual. She'd started dating someone, though she was oddly secretive about it. Her friends noticed she was always checking her phone, always smiling at text messages, always deflecting questions with a mysterious grin. "You'll meet him when the time is right," she'd say. "Trust me." Her mother noticed changes too. Jessica was buying new clothes, wearing makeup more often, staying out later than usual. But these weren't red flags. They were the signs of a young woman in love, a young woman whose life was finally coming together. After years of sacrifice and struggle, it seemed like Jessica's moment had arrived. And then came October 14th. The discovery of her abandoned car sent shockwaves through Hartsville. Within hours, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation was on scene. Within days, FBI agents had arrived. This was no longer just a missing person case. This was something darker. The forensic examination of Jessica's car revealed troubling details. There were signs of a struggle: a broken fingernail on the floor mat, a small bloodstain on the steering wheel. Her cell phone was missing. So was the silver necklace she always wore, a gift from her grandmother. Whoever had taken Jessica had done so violently, suddenly, without giving her a chance to fight back. Investigators began interviewing everyone in Jessica's life: her coworkers, her friends, her family, the regulars at the diner who knew her by name. Everyone had an alibi. Everyone seemed genuinely devastated. And everyone swore they had no idea what had happened to her. But someone was lying. The mysterious boyfriend became the focus of the investigation. Who was he? Why had Jessica kept him secret? Her phone records showed dozens of calls and texts to an unregistered prepaid phone, a burner, untraceable. Her friends described a man they'd never met, a relationship that existed only in shadows. Was he protecting her, or was he the reason she was gone? 3 weeks after Jessica's disappearance, a hunter found her body. She was in a wooded area 15 miles from where her car had been discovered, partially buried beneath a pile of leaves and branches. The cause of death was strangulation. She had been dead since the night she vanished. The discovery of Jessica's body transformed the investigation from a missing persons case into a homicide. The grief that had been simmering in Hartsville exploded into something raw and desperate. This wasn't supposed to happen here. Not to Jessica. Not to anyone. Detective Marcus Webb was assigned to lead the case. He was a 20-year veteran of the Truesdale County Sheriff's Office, a man who had seen his share of tragedy but had never encountered anything like this. Webb was methodical, patient, and deeply affected by the case in ways he would later struggle to articulate. Something about Jessica's face in those missing person flyers haunted him. Something about her story felt unfinished. The autopsy revealed additional details. Jessica had been killed within hours of her disappearance. There was evidence of a physical altercation, bruises on her arms, defensive wounds on her hands. She had fought back. She had tried to survive. But her attacker had been stronger, more determined, more brutal. The forensic team collected every piece of evidence they could find: DNA samples, fiber analysis, soil composition. But 2003 was a different time for forensic science. The DNA technology that would later revolutionize criminal investigations was still in its infancy. The samples collected from Jessica's body were insufficient for a match. The fibers led nowhere. The case was already going cold before it had a chance to heat up. Detective Webb refused to give up. He worked 18-hour days, conducting interview after interview, following lead after lead. He created a massive timeline of Jessica's final days, tracking her movements, her conversations, her interactions. He was looking for something, anything, that would point him toward her killer. The mysterious boyfriend remained elusive. The burner phone had been destroyed. Investigators found its remains in a trash can near the diner, smashed into pieces. Whoever Jessica had been seeing knew how to cover their tracks. They had planned this. They had prepared. Webb began to develop a theory. Jessica's killer wasn't a stranger. This wasn't a random act of violence. The level of planning, the intimacy of the crime scene, the effort to conceal evidence, all of it pointed to someone who knew her well. Someone who had gotten close to her on purpose. Someone who had been waiting for the right moment. But who? The months stretched on. Webb interviewed dozens of people, some of them multiple times. He studied every man in Jessica's orbit: coworkers, customers at the diner, old boyfriends, neighbors. He even looked at her family members, eliminating them one by one through alibis and evidence. Nothing connected. Nothing clicked. By the summer of 2004, the case had officially gone cold. The FBI agents went home. The TBI moved on to other investigations. The media stopped covering the story. And slowly, painfully, Hartsville began to return to something resembling normal life. But Detective Webb couldn't let go. He kept a photo of Jessica on his desk, right next to his family pictures. He reviewed the case files on weekends, looking for something he'd missed. He called Jessica's mother on the anniversary of her death every single year, promising her that he hadn't forgotten, that he never would. The years passed. Webb's hair turned gray. His colleagues retired. New cases came and went. But Jessica Morrison remained his obsession, his burden, his unfulfilled promise. And here's where I need to pause and ask you something I want you to really think about. If someone in your community, someone you trusted completely, someone you saw every day, turned out to be capable of something like this, would you believe it? Would you accept it? Or would you make excuses, find ways to deny what was right in front of you? Leave your answer in the comments. I want to know what you think. Because what happens next in this story is going to challenge everything you believe about the people around you. Time is a strange thing. It heals some wounds while deepening others. For the Morrison family, time became both enemy and companion, a constant reminder of what they had lost and a dim hope that someday, somehow, justice would arrive. Jessica's mother, Patricia, never fully recovered. She kept Jessica's room exactly as it had been on that October night, a shrine to a life cut short. The nursing textbooks still sat on the nightstand. The clothes still hung in the closet. Patricia would sit in that room for hours, sometimes talking to her daughter as if she could hear, sometimes just sitting in silence with her grief. Jessica's father, Robert, dealt with his pain differently. He threw himself into work, into distraction, into anything that would keep him from thinking too much. He rarely spoke about Jessica, not because he didn't care, but because the words hurt too much. The hardware store became his refuge, the repetitive work a kind of meditation that kept the darkness at bay. Her siblings struggled in their own ways. Her older sister moved away, unable to bear the memories that every corner of Hartsville held. Her younger brother stayed, but developed problems with alcohol, self-medicating a grief he couldn't articulate. The Morrison family, once so close, began to splinter under the weight of their loss. And through it all, the killer walked free. I've often wondered what those years were like for the person who murdered Jessica. Did they feel guilt? Did they lie awake at night, haunted by what they had done? Or had they somehow compartmentalized their crime, locked it away in some dark corner of their mind where it couldn't touch their daily life? The evidence suggests the latter. Because while the Morrison family was falling apart, while Detective Webb was losing sleep over unsolved mysteries, The killer was living a normal life. They were going to work. They were paying bills. They were maintaining relationships and attending community events and doing all the things that normal people do. Hartsville, meanwhile, developed its own relationship with the case. It became the town's unsolved tragedy, its cautionary tale. Parents warned their children to be careful. Young women were told to never walk alone at night. The case became woven into the fabric of the community, a dark thread that colored everything without ever being fully acknowledged. Theories circulated endlessly. Some people believed it was a drifter, a stranger passing through who had spotted Jessica and acted on impulse. Others suspected someone from her past, an old boyfriend with a grudge, a jealous acquaintance. A few dark whispers suggested it might be someone still living among them, but most people dismissed such thoughts as paranoid fantasy. The diner where Jessica worked became a kind of informal memorial. Her photograph hung behind the counter for years. Regular customers would sometimes pause in front of it, offering a silent moment of remembrance. New employees were always told her story, always reminded of the young woman who had worked there, who had dreamed of becoming a nurse, who had been taken too soon. Detective Webb retired in 2015, but he didn't stop working the case. He had copied all the files, all the evidence, all the interview transcripts. He set up a small office in his garage, covering the walls with photos and timelines and theories. His wife worried about his obsession, but she understood. Some cases become part of you. Some victims become personal. He kept reaching out to new forensic labs, asking about advances in DNA technology. He followed developments in genetic genealogy, the new science that was solving cold cases across the country. He knew that someday, somehow, the technology would catch up to the evidence. He just had to wait. And wait he did. Through the Obama years. Through the Trump years. Through a global pandemic that seemed to stop time itself. Marcus Webb waited and hoped and refused to give up on Jessica Morrison. The year was 2023, exactly 20 years after Jessica's murder, and Marcus Webb was 73 years old. His health was declining. His doctor had warned him about his heart, about his blood pressure, about the stress he was putting himself under. But he couldn't stop. Not now. Not when he was so close. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, a true crime podcast. A young journalist named Sarah Chun had started investigating cold cases in Tennessee, producing detailed episodes that attracted millions of listeners. When she reached out to Webb about Jessica Morrison's case, he was initially skeptical. He'd seen too many media outlets sensationalize the tragedy without bringing any new information. But Sarah was different. She was thorough, respectful, and genuinely determined to help. Her podcast episode on Jessica aired in March 2023 and quickly went viral. It caught the attention of a forensic genealogist named Dr. Eleanor Vance, who specialized in using DNA evidence to identify criminals in cold cases. She contacted Sarah, who connected her with Webb, and suddenly, after 20 years, the case was alive again. Dr. Vance reviewed the original evidence and made a remarkable discovery. A small sample of biological material that had been collected from Jessica's body in 2003 had been preserved but never fully analyzed. With modern technology, she believed she could extract a usable DNA profile. It was a long shot, but it was a shot. The process took months. The sample was degraded, contaminated, barely usable. But Dr. Vance was patient and skilled. Slowly, painstakingly, she built a genetic profile of Jessica's killer. And then she began the even more challenging work of identifying who that profile belonged to. Genetic genealogy is a complex science. It involves uploading DNA profiles to public databases, finding distant relatives, and then building family trees backward until you narrow down the potential suspects. It's like solving a puzzle with a million pieces, many of them missing or damaged. But it works. It has solved hundreds of cold cases, brought justice to families who had lost all hope. By the fall of 2023, Dr. Vance had narrowed the search to a single family in Middle Tennessee. The killer was male, Caucasian, born between 1965 and 1980. He had ancestors who had lived in Truesdale County for generations. He was local. He had always been local. Webb felt his heart racing as the picture became clearer. He had suspected for years that the killer was someone from the community, someone who had known Jessica, someone who had been hiding in plain sight. Now he was about to find out who. In January 2024, Dr. Vance made a definitive identification. She called Webb on a Tuesday morning, her voice shaking with emotion. "Marcus," she said, "I know who killed her." Webb sat down heavily, gripping the phone with both hands. "Tell me," he whispered. The name she spoke changed everything. It was a name Webb knew well, a name everyone in Hartsville knew, a name that seemed impossible, unthinkable, a name that would shake the community to its foundation. The killer was not a stranger. The killer was not a drifter. The killer was someone who had searched for Jessica alongside her family, someone who had attended her memorial service, someone who had lived in Hartsville all along, respected, trusted, above suspicion. The killer was Thomas Raymond Hollis. Thomas Hollis was 54 years old, a deacon at the First Baptist Church of Hartsville, a Little League coach, a volunteer firefighter, a husband, and a father of 3. He was the kind of man who organized charity drives and showed up to help neighbors after storms. He was the kind of man everyone pointed to as an example of what a good citizen should be. He was also a murderer. The arrest happened at dawn on February 15, 2024. A team of law enforcement officers, including representatives from the Truesdale County Sheriff's Office, the TBI, and the FBI, converged on Hollis's home on the outskirts of Hartsville. They had been planning this moment for weeks, coordinating every detail, preparing for every contingency. Marcus Webb was there, even though he had no official capacity. The current sheriff, a man who had been a rookie when Jessica was killed, had invited him as a professional courtesy. This was Webb's case. This was Webb's moment. He had earned the right to see it through. Hollis answered the door in his bathrobe, coffee cup in hand, the picture of domestic normalcy. His wife stood behind him, confused and frightened. His children were still asleep upstairs, unaware that their world was about to collapse. "Thomas Raymond Hollis," the lead agent said, "you are under arrest for the murder of Jessica Lynn Morrison." Hollis's face went pale. For a moment, just a moment, Webb saw something in his eyes, a flicker of the monster behind the mask. Then it was gone, replaced by a performance of confusion and outrage. "This is insane," Hollis protested as they handcuffed him. "I don't know what you're talking about. I barely knew that girl." But the evidence told a different story. The DNA was irrefutable. Thomas Hollis had killed Jessica Morrison. And in the hours that followed his arrest, as investigators searched his home and interviewed his family, a horrifying picture began to emerge. Hollis had known Jessica far better than he'd ever admitted. In 2003, he had been her secret boyfriend, the mysterious man she'd been too scared to introduce to her friends and family. Scared because Hollis was married, because he was older, because he had a reputation to protect. Their relationship had been conducted entirely in shadows, in stolen moments, in lies. When Jessica had threatened to end things, when she had demanded that Hollis leave his wife and commit to her fully, he had panicked. He couldn't let his secret come out. He couldn't let his carefully constructed lie fall apart. So he had killed her. The murder had been impulsive, but the cover-up had been calculated. Hollis had destroyed the burner phone, had carefully disposed of Jessica's belongings, had inserted himself into the search party to monitor the investigation from inside. He had watched Detective Webb interview suspects, had listened to the theories, had adjusted his behavior to stay above suspicion. And it had worked. For 21 years, it had worked. News of the arrest spread through Hartsville like wildfire. People gathered in coffee shops and church parking lots, trying to process what they had heard. Thomas Hollis, the deacon, the Little League coach? It couldn't be true. It had to be a mistake. But it wasn't a mistake. The DNA didn't lie. And as more details emerged about the affair, about the cover-up, about the decades of deception, the community's disbelief turned to something darker. Anger. Betrayal. A profound sense that they had been fooled by someone they trusted completely. The trial of Thomas Hollis began in September 2024 and lasted 3 weeks. The courtroom was packed every day, filled with residents of Hartsville who needed to see justice done, who needed to understand how this had happened in their community. Patricia Morrison was there for every moment. She was 70 now, frail and gray, but her eyes burned with an intensity that 20 years of grief could not diminish. She sat in the front row, directly behind the prosecutor, staring at the man who had murdered her daughter. Marcus Webb testified on the third day. He walked the jury through 20 years of investigation, 20 years of dead ends and false leads, and sleepless nights. He showed them how close they had come to solving the case in 2003, how Hollis had slipped through the cracks, how only the advances in DNA technology had finally brought him to justice. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. The DNA match. Phone records that had been reanalyzed with modern technology. Witnesses who remembered seeing Hollis's truck near the location where Jessica's car was found. A former girlfriend of Hollis who testified that he had exhibited controlling, violent behavior years before Jessica's murder. The defense tried to create doubt, to suggest that the DNA evidence was contaminated, that Hollis was being framed. But their arguments felt desperate, hollow. The jury wasn't buying it. Everyone could see the truth. On the stand, Hollis maintained his innocence with a calm that seemed almost pathological. He expressed sorrow for Jessica's family, denied any romantic relationship with her, insisted that he had been home with his wife on the night of the murder. His wife, looking shell-shocked and exhausted, corroborated his alibi. But she had done so 20 years ago as well, and now everyone understood that she had been lying without knowing it, that her husband had snuck out while she slept and returned before she woke. The most powerful moment of the trial came when Jessica's mother took the stand. Patricia Morrison spoke directly to Hollis, her voice trembling but clear. "You took my daughter," she said. "You took her smile, her laugh, her dreams. You took her from me, and then you had the cruelty to stand beside me at her funeral. You watched me cry. You offered me comfort. And the whole time, you knew? You knew because you were the one who killed her." She paused, gathering herself. "But I want you to know something, Thomas. You didn't win. You thought you got away with it, but you didn't. My daughter's memory was stronger than your lies. And now the whole world knows what you are. Now the whole world knows what you did. And you're going to spend the rest of your life in a cage, thinking about the young woman whose life you destroyed. I hope you never know a moment's peace. I hope her face haunts you until your dying breath." The courtroom was silent. Even the judge seemed moved. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. They returned with a verdict of guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, kidnapping, tampering with evidence. The judge sentenced Thomas Hollis to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As Hollis was led away in handcuffs, he finally broke. The mask he had worn for over 2 decades crumbled, and for the first time, the community saw the real Thomas Hollis, the weak, cowardly, pathetic man who had taken a young woman's life because he couldn't face the consequences of his own choices. In the weeks following the verdict, Hartsville began the long process of healing. It wasn't easy. The betrayal ran deep. Many people felt complicit, wondering if they had missed signs, if they could have done something differently, if they had enabled Hollis simply by trusting him. But slowly, tentatively, hope began to emerge from the wreckage. The diner where Jessica worked announced the creation of a scholarship fund in her name, dedicated to helping young people from Truesdale County pursue careers in healthcare. The first recipient would be announced on what would have been Jessica's 45th birthday. Patricia Morrison, despite her age and her grief, found herself transformed by the verdict. She became an advocate for cold case victims' families, traveling across Tennessee to share her story and urge patience and perseverance. She told everyone who would listen that justice was possible, that no case was ever truly cold as long as someone kept fighting. "My daughter didn't get to live her dream," Patricia told a crowd at a victims' rights rally. "She didn't get to become a nurse. She didn't get to help people the way she wanted to. But in a way, her story has helped more people than she ever could have imagined. Her story has shown families that hope is never lost. Her story has reminded communities that we have to stay vigilant, that we can never stop looking for the truth. My Jessica still matters, and she always will." Marcus Webb passed away 6 months after the verdict, peacefully in his sleep. His wife found a note he had written, addressed to Jessica Morrison. I promised you I would find him, the note read. I promised you I would never give up. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm sorry I couldn't do it sooner. But it's done now. You can rest. And so can I. At his funeral, which was attended by hundreds of law enforcement officers and community members, Patricia Morrison spoke. She thanked Webb for his dedication, his persistence, his refusal to let her daughter be forgotten. She said that Jessica and Marcus were together now, finally at peace, finally free from the burden they had carried for so long. As for the community of Hartsville, life goes on. It always does. The scars remain, but so does the determination to learn from what happened. People are a little more careful now, a little more aware that the faces we trust can hide terrible secrets. But they haven't become cynical. They haven't lost their faith in each other. Because the truth is, most people are good. Most people would never hurt anyone. And the rare exceptions, the Thomas Hollises of the world, cannot be allowed to define our communities or destroy our capacity for trust. I think about Jessica Morrison often. I think about what she could have become, the lives she could have touched, the difference she could have made. Her story is a tragedy, but it's also a testament to the power of persistence, the importance of memory, and the enduring human need for justice. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for caring about Jessica, for honoring her memory, for being part of the community that refuses to let victims be forgotten. Your attention matters. Your engagement matters. Every share, every comment, every subscription is a vote for justice, a declaration that these stories deserve to be told. And now, as I close this chapter, I want to return to where we began. The camera doesn't lie, but people do. And for 21 years, a killer walked free because a community couldn't imagine that evil could wear such a familiar face. But the truth has a way of emerging. Justice has a way of finding those who try to escape it. And hope, fragile, persistent, unbreakable hope, has a way of surviving even the darkest nights. Jessica Morrison deserved better. She deserved to live her dreams, to become a nurse, to help people, to grow old surrounded by love. She didn't get that chance. But she got something else, something that no one could have predicted when her body was found in those woods 21 years ago. She got justice. She got remembrance. And she got a community that will never, ever forget her name. Rest in peace, Jessica. Your story has been told. And the man who silenced you will spend the rest of his days paying for what he did. Some cases take decades to solve. Some families wait a lifetime for answers. But as long as there are people like Marcus Webb, people like Sarah Chun, people like Dr. Eleanor Vance, and people like you, watching and sharing and caring, no case is ever truly hopeless. The darkness is real, but so is the light. And in the end, the light always wins. Subscribe to this channel. Share this video. And remember, justice delayed is not justice denied. It's just justice waiting for its moment. Jessica Morrison's moment finally came, and it was worth the wait.